welcome back to another video. My name is Nikita, and on this channel we chat about the inclusion of BIPOC, especially South Asian stories, both in literature and in real life. So you can expect a lot of book chats, book recommendations, as well as my podcast called Brown People Problems. So for today I have the same video that we do once every month, and that is everything that I read in the month of July. And I'm going to be throwing in some of the books that I still haven't finished. I'm currently finishing now that we're into August, and what I'm hoping to read in the month of August. Alright, I hope you guys had a good reading month. Mine was a good month, good reading month, not as extensive. I only read, well, not only, but I could get through 6 books in the month of July. It was, the first proper month of summer, and it was certainly like a bit tougher to make more time for reading. But I have a few books that worked really well for me, and that didn't so much, so let's chat about them. Okay, first up I have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I DNF'd this book. I felt awful doing it. I believe I got a good 35-40% through, and I had heard so much about this book on BookTube, but unfortunately it fell really flat for me. And I feel awful saying this because it doesn't mean that it's a bad book. It's just my personal experience of it, and I am going to be giving this another shot sometime from now, a lot of time from now. I just want to get some space from this, but this is really just supposed to be like a feel-good rom-com about 2 individuals. You have like opposites attract type of romance. You have Alexis, who's this, I think, like ER doctor, and then you have Daniel, who's this small town carpenter, and it's an unlikely romance that ends up happening. So it just felt slow for me, it fell flat for me, and it wasn't doing anything for me. I know I'm not sounding very articulate, but it just wasn't it for me, and I don't believe in forcing your way through a book that you're really not enjoying, only to then rate it poorly later. So I DNF'd this, but I am going to be picking this up in the future, and hopefully I will feel differently about it. Alright, after that I read One Italian Summer by Rebecca Surley, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Anyway, this was an interesting book. This was an interesting one. This takes place in Positano, on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and it's around this sort of like this mother-daughter relationship. So it starts off with our main character. Her name is Katie. Her and her mom were supposed to take a trip to the Amalfi Coast, but her mom ends up passing away from cancer just before the trip. So Katie decides to still go ahead and do the trip, and kind of go through the same itinerary that her and her mom had planned. And so it's certainly like a story of grief, loss, and a parent-child relationship and what that's like. There was one element in this that was completely unexpected for me. It came out of nowhere. Essentially what happens is she shows up in Positano, and one day she wakes up and she walks out of her lobby of her hotel, and she sees her mom standing there. So it's not her present day mom, it's her mom 30 years ago. Because her mom apparently was in the Amalfi 30 years ago, and she's been raving to Katie about it, and that's why they, were choosing to go in the present day. So Katie sees her mom there and forms a friendship with her mom. Her mom is obviously 30 years old at that time. She doesn't recognize Katie, but they form this like friendship, and so there's some, magical realism, some element of that here. I really enjoyed this book until the ending. The ending certainly felt very abrupt for me. I wish there was more of an explanation around the magical realism part and what was going on there, but I really enjoyed how atmospheric it was. I may be going to Italy later on in the year, so it certainly got me in the mood and got me really quite excited to be in that part of the world. And it was a very quick read, a very easy read, and it was one of those reads that you can, kind of read on the beach or in the summer, like those like feel-good reads. I gave this a 3.5 stars. After that, I read A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. This is part 2 in A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by the same author. This is a Regency era romance rom-com that I had read for the first time like last year. So the first one, this just came out in the month of July. I was there that same day to pick it up. I really enjoy this type of like a setting. I really enjoy Regency era settings. I think I have a very complex relationship with the British monarchy and the colonial institution, but I enjoy fiction set in that time. So this follows Eliza. It starts off with her being this like young debutante, and then she ends up marrying someone who's much older than her, and then he passes away, and now she's a young widow. And she crosses paths with her former I guess like lover, and a new character. So there's a bit of a love triangle, like you can see. However, I really enjoyed Eliza's character development in this story. So, you know, there's some Regency era stories that are just about the romance. And if you've been here for some time, you know that I need my books to keep romance as just a subplot as opposed to the main plot. So I enjoy a more like fictional, literary fictional type of a main plot, and the romance has to be a subplot. So the romance is certainly a subplot in here. There's a huge focus on women's autonomy, politics within a love triangle, and just like this character is so lovable. She's like, you know, you're like your typical kind of young woman in her mid-20s who's been raised to be this like peacekeeper and people pleaser, and you really kind of see her dynamic in her relationship with her own mother shift as she like starts to find her own voice, because she's someone who's done everything by the book and still finds herself in a place where she's feeling like something is missing. There's a void of some sort in her life, and I really enjoyed that aspect of this book. I gave this 4.5 stars, which was higher than the first book. The first book I gave 4 stars. Gave this one 4.5. I really enjoyed this female character. I thought she was a total delight to read and spend time with. And Sophie Irwin's writing is just incredible. It transports you to a different time. It is a good laugh. You get a good chuckle out of her books. And they also prompt you to reflect a little bit deeply on some things as well. So if you're looking for a fun read that is light, yet also impactful in a way, I would recommend this. Okay, after that I read The Bandit Queens by Perini Shroff. I am sorry if you are sick of hearing me talk about this book, but I did technically read it in the month of July, so I have to include it here. But this is the very first book by this author, and this was great. I gave this 5 stars. It takes place in present day rural India, and it's about this villager, this young woman named Nikita, whose husband goes missing, and the villagers assume that she killed him. So she earns this like reputation where she's feared and revered in a way, until a whole bunch of other women in the village start coming up to her, and they want her help in disposing their abusive husbands. And so there's definitely this really active kind of layer of satire present throughout the book. You certainly see a huge emphasis on female friendships and how they evolve with time. And there's of course like a really great commentary on a women's, sense of like autonomy in a patriarchal society, and female friendships in a patriarchal society. And there's a lot of commentary on caste politics, class politics, all the while being also really funny. I really enjoyed this. I can't stop raving about this book. I thought it was fun. I thought it was great. And it seems like a big book, but it was a pretty quick read. And if you're looking for something new that's, kind of like a unique literary fiction plot, I would check this out. After that, I went on a bit of a Greek mythological retelling kick. And the very first one that I read was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now, I really enjoy my Greek mythology, and you know me, I love any sort of retellings, especially mythological retellings. And I read Circe by Madeline Miller, and that was great as well. And I had heard a lot about this book and everyone had been raving about it, so I picked it up and I read it. I will say it took me some time to get into it. I wasn't completely like enraptured by it, but when I did get into it a quarter of the way in the book, I really enjoyed it. So this is Song of Achilles. It's about Achilles, the famous warrior from the Trojan War. But the book is from the perspective of Patroclus and their relationship and their friendship and then their eventual relationship. It starts off with Patroclus's early life, and then it follows him into when he meets Achilles, and then into the Trojan War and right up until the end. I give it a 4 stars. I really enjoyed the way that it was written, and I enjoyed the emphasis on this relationship. It didn't get me the same way that it has gotten other people. So because I see this book a lot on Book Talk, and people really kind of say that this book emotionally destroyed them. That wasn't the case with me, but I still really enjoyed it. I think some of the books on Book Talk are really extremely hyped, and there needs to be like a reality check with a lot of those books, but this one was quite worth the hype. This was fun. Are there better Greek mythological retellings? Absolutely. But Madeline Miller has a really lovely way of storytelling. Her storytelling is so sort of like lyrical and poetic and almost like mystical, right? Which is really nice for the setting of this world. So this was something that I'm glad I finally picked up after hearing about it for so long, and I enjoyed it. After that, because I was on a bit of a Greek mythological retelling kick, I read Elektra by Jennifer Saint. This was my first Jennifer Saint book, and Elektra is a character that I wasn't really too familiar with. Knew like a bit of like a gist of it, very little, but I decided to pick this up, and this one is just not entirely focused on Elektra. It revolves around 3 female characters. You've got Clytemnestra, who's the wife of Agamemnon, the guy who really kind of started the Trojan War. You have got Cassandra, who is a daughter of Priam and Hecabe. So she is Paris and Hector's sister, who has been cursed by Apollo to be able to see the future, but cursed in the sense that no one ever believes it. And then it also, of course, follows Elektra, who's the daughter of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. And this was really interesting. I really enjoyed the multiple kind of points of view and perspectives of these characters, but it really follows from the start of the Trojan War during into the end. And it was really nice, as always, to see the female perspectives in these like really popular stories that we've heard of our whole lives and watched on TV, but we don't really have female perspectives. I have to say, Jennifer Saint's writing is so captivating. She paints this really vivid picture of what each woman is like. So, you really kind of you find yourself going through these like emotional roller coasters with these stories, and especially I think Jennifer Saint's writing. There were parts where I was feeling, a lot of compassion and grief for Clytemnestra, but also just a lot of frustration and anger with her. So I really like imperfect characters. I don't like idealization of certain people or certain characters. And if that's a lens that you enjoy, you would really like Elektra. This was a really, really great book. I'm actually still on a bit of that kick, so I'm hoping to read Ithaca next, which is the story of Penelope, the wife of Odysseus. And I will keep you posted on how that goes. And if I didn't say so, I gave Elektra 4 stars. All right, now let's talk about some of the books that I have been reading in July, but I just couldn't finish them. And one of them, the first one is The Mistress of Patia House by Sujata Massey. This is book 4 in the Widows of Malabar Hill series that I talk about a lot. And I'm sure you're sick of hearing about it, but I love this series. This is about, it's a historical fiction series set in 1920s India, and it follows Praveen Mistry, who's the first female lawyer in Bombay, and just her kind of process of being the first female solicitor, what that's like, and in colonial India. And then also she finds herself unraveling these mysteries around her clients' and it's really interesting. This one seems to have a really huge focus on women's sexual health at that time, especially like women's like prenatal and perinatal health, societally, like the gaps in their healthcare societally, and it seems like the mystery here is really revolving that. The reason why it's taken me so long to read this, even though I love this series, is because it is massive, and also part of me doesn't want this to finish because it just came out in the month of July, and the next one, if there is going to be a next one, is likely not going to come out till next year, at the very least the end of this year. And part of me doesn't want this to be over. I really enjoyed spending time with this character and seeing her kind of grow in the last 3 books. And so I'm taking my time with this. And also, this is not the kind of mystery I want to say that you can binge. It's not a simplistic mystery. There's a lot of layers, there's a lot of characters, not an overwhelming amount of characters, but the story is really layered. There's political commentary, cultural commentary, commentary on class, and like and these like all these like social themes are really present, and that creates for this really lovely rich story. But then in a story like that, it also takes a little bit more time to really absorb it and to get through it. I am also reading First Comes Like by Alicia Rai. I was looking to pick up a light-hearted summer rom-com. I really enjoyed another book by this author. It's called Partners in Crime. That was a really fun rom-com, and I decided to pick this up. This is essentially about a famous beauty influencer on YouTube and a Bollywood star, or son of a Bollywood star. He comes from an influential family, and this is set in Los Angeles. Now, I haven't fallen in love with it right off the bat like I did with the other one, but I'm only 30 pages through, so I am giving it some time and I'm practicing patience with it. You'll certainly hear me talk a little bit more about this at the end of the month. Another book that I'm reading that is a very, very, very unlikely pick for me, that I actually didn't think I would read, is The Adventures of Amina El Sarafi by Shannon Chakrabarty. Now, this is really interesting. I'm going to try to do my best to explain the premise of this novel. So it is about a retired female pirate, Amina El Sarafi. It's set, I want to say, it is historical fiction, but it's also a fantasy. And it's set about 1,000 years ago. I want to say 1,000 to 1,100 years ago. And so it's set in our world. And I don't think I have read many fantasies that are set in our world in a historical context. So they still carry this huge relevance, but there are elements of fantasy in there. So it's interesting. But it's set basically in the Indian Ocean, which is between India, South Africa, and Middle East, right? So that like area in between. And it's about Amina El Sarafi, who's a retired female pirate. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book, and there was nothing about a book that was screaming out to me. I don't really enjoy pirate stories. It's not really my favorite thing to read about, but because I kept hearing so much noise around it, I decided to pick it up, and it's been actually really enjoyable. It's massive, so I'm taking my time with it. I believe I'm only got like 4 or 5, 6 chapters left perhaps. But it basically starts off with, Amina's life currently. So she lives in Middle East in a village, and she is like a bit of a recluse because she is a really famous pirate, and she's now, just like turned to God and rectified all of her old ways, and now she's trying to live a clean, spiritually clean and like religiously grounded life. But she gets an offer to return to the seas for something that really like she can't refuse. And I won't tell you what it is. You have to read it. I don't want to ruin it for you. And so she finds herself going back, and it's really interesting because I really enjoy history, and the fact that it takes place in our life, and it comes with like a really nice map, and you get to see her travel between like the coast of like the Middle Eastern countries, and like there's a lot of like commentary around the religion, like the religious conflicts at that time between Islam and Christianity. And I believe there's reference to like the Crusades in here too, but she hasn't explicitly said that. And you certainly see this notorious woman in leadership really kind of navigating all of these fantastical challenges that come her way, like while at the same time, in a sense, grappling with the very real life political and social conflicts that existed at that time. Maybe a lot of people won't enjoy that. I really loved it. This book is really highly rated on Goodreads. The overall rating of this book is 4.34 on Goodreads, and it has about 18,000 reviews. And I can see why. There are some parts of it that I don't love. So there's certainly a lot of perhaps like Arabic words, and a lot of those sound quite similar to one of the languages that I can speak. So it wasn't hard for me to bridge the gap. But I can see how someone who is not familiar with those terms or any of those sister languages can kind of get lost. But in my opinion, it's not a barrier at all. If anything, it creates for like a richer story. So that shouldn't deter anyone. But I'm excited to finish this and share more with you, because this is a kind of book that I never pick up. I don't like pirates. I just like, doesn't interest me at all. But this has been fun. I think if it wasn't for the historical fiction element, I may not have liked it as much, but I'm really enjoying that. That's it, everyone. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July and that I'm hoping to read in the month of August. I'm sure there's going to be more books that I'm going to read in August. It is a jam-packed month for me. I'm traveling, I'm out of town, I have a lot going on. So I'm hoping that I can get around to a little bit more reading, because all of these books just sound really exciting. But I'll keep you posted. Once again, thank you so much for being here. If there's any books that you want me to read, please link them down below. I am more than happy to pick them up and give them a read. Thank you so much for being here. As always, it's lovely to connect. It's lovely to hear from you about your thoughts about the books and recommendations. And I will see you in my next one.